Hello again, and welcome to Your Story Corner, the podcast. A safe space designed and created specifically to help you relax and unwind, and if it's time, to help you drift off to sleep. To remind you, no matter where you are and who you are not alone. And no matter whatever is going on in your world right now, in your life, remember, it will pass. It's going to pass. And you are going to be okay. You're going to be okay. So, settle back and relax as we continue to explore the magic and power of books and having a bedtime story read to you. If you are new here, welcome. We're glad you found our podcast. Here we read you bedtime stories and share some fascinating insights and the magic behind some of your favorite books and authors from around the world. So settle back as you join me by the fireplace for another bedtime story. And thank you for downloading our podcast wherever you are streaming this right now. We have had nearly 3,000 downloads in the month since we started, and we couldn't do it without you. That's why it's called Your Story Corner. To find out more of when we go live on TikTok and all the latest, go to our website, Yourstorycorner.com. There you will find all the links where you can follow us on all our social media channels and get the latest for when we do our live bedtime stories on TikTok from 10 p.m. UK time. This week, we thought we'd explore a bit more about the power of bedtime stories, and then read to you one of the most favorites of all of the requests we get on Story Corner, a little bit of Peter Pan. So I hope you are sitting comfortably, or maybe you are now just winding down, curled up in bed. I hope you're comfy. So let's start, shall we? In this technological age that we live now, sometimes easy to forget the power and the simplicity of a book, and specifically here, bedtime stories. But what is it about telling a bedtime story that has such an effect on us, adults and children alike? No one knows when the first bedtime story was told. Experts believe it's impossible to determine the origin of storytelling. They believe that humans have been sharing stories ever since we had the ability to speak. Only humans make stories. Stories make us human. Myths and legends, fairy tales and fables, ghost stories, heroic adventures. No matter the type of story, we can get hooked time and time again. Think back when you were younger, a child. What was the story that changed your life? The book that you will never forget, or introduced you to the power of books and your love of reading? It's just a simple magic that we can care about. It can help us question our identity. Who am I? We will continually redefine our sense of self in every chapter of our own lives. Bedtime stories, I believe, allow us to form a stronger sense of personal identity by thinking about what they value, the choices you would make in the character's situation. With stories, we can better understand where we are in the moment and just focus on the peace, calm that either reading or being read a bedtime story can give us. Just as stories help children and adults alike create our sense of self, they also form a deep sense of connection to others. People who feel lonely, long to be understood, can find comfort through relating to a character in a story who's going through similar struggles. They can see how a character they admire handles relationships with others, the trials and tribulations, or the journey ahead. For all of us in uncertain times, it could be invaluable to hear a bedtime story. That's what I believe. A story can help, I also think, help us find our own courage and the optimism to persevere. The sense of belonging can extend outward, beyond relating to family and friends, to feeling connected with your community, your culture, and the world. Of course, the simplest but perhaps most profound form of connection that bedtime stories give us is the bond between family, between adult and child, or even our inner child. Through the act of storytelling, giving vulnerable people a sense of trust and unconditional love. Picasso said it took him many years to learn how to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child. The imaginative capacity of all of us, beyond anything we might comprehend with our rational minds. You can think the color of the sky is purple, envision a whole new dimension, universe, and world. Believe in the seemingly impossible. Bedtime stories unlock a door into your imagination, taking us beyond our circumstances to other realms. And when it comes to children's and our inner child's creativity, hearing or reading a story is completely different from watching a show or a film. Research shows how listening to a story requires us to use our mind's eye to visualize what is happening, meaning you strengthen the power of your imagination. And subliminally you are letting your mind and thoughts drift away, giving your brain a new task, focus, and imagination. Stories, I believe, help us find a sense of purpose and inspire us to dream. There is a famous speech that Kevin Costner gave while reading Catching the Moon. It's a true story about a girl in the 30s who defied any objections to eventually become the first woman to play for an all-male professional baseball team. At the end of his speech, Kevin Costner, the actor, gave an inspiring note for children and all of us that I believe reminds us why bedtime stories and imagination will always matter, and probably no more than right now in the world we're currently navigating through. And it goes like this. Dreams are important, and sometimes you can find dreams in books. That's what makes this story so special. It's important to dream. You can be a lot of things in your life, not just a baseball player, but the person who wrote this book someday. You can be a lot of things. That's what I love about books. They take us places. You know, books can take you around the world, and you never leave your home. When I think of a lot of the great things that have come into my life, a lot of them have come from books, just like this. I think if you start reading as young as you can, you're gonna have a really great life. Very profound. And maybe one of the reasons why I all started Your Story Corner. Because I firmly believed in these troubling worlds that we live in, where we're confounded by noise and endless social media and news, division and events. And we've been through a lot in recent times. Sometimes the most simplest things, picking up a book, can be difficult. By being encouraged to listen to a bedtime story, I believe can help us relax, settle, focus the mind, take us back to a place of comfort, and I hope inspire you to make your own journeys in your own way. One of the many books that I often get requested for to read on our lives, or generally, and certainly by my own children when they were growing up, is probably one of the most famous adventures and stories for children to get lost in. And that, of course, is Peter Pan. Perhaps your introduction to Peter Pan was the 1953 Disney film. Or maybe, years later, the Steven Spielberg movie Hook, starring the late, great Robin Williams. But what do you know about J.M. Barrie? Well, before I read to you one of the most famous chapters, here's some facts you might not know about Peter Pan. Peter Pan, believe it or not, began as a play, not a novel. And the first stage production of J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, entitled Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, opened at London's Duke of York Theatre on the 27th of December 1904. The play, of course, was an overnight sensation and was subsequently reviewed every year for the following 10 years. It wasn't until 1911 that the play was then adapted into the novel, called Peter and Wendy. J.M. Barrie kept tweaking and playing around with the play's story. While Peter Pan himself may not have grown up, the script changed and evolved many times. Every subsequent year that Peter Pan was staged, the script received various rewrites from J.M. Barrie himself. You probably, when thinking of Peter Pan, conjuring up the image of the boy who never grew up wearing green. But he always wasn't clad in green. The iconic colour long associated with Peter Pan was in fact a Disney creation. The overwhelming success of the animated movie caused the image to stick, but before the film's release, productions of the play called for brown, tan and auburn-coloured clothes, colours of leaves and wooded areas that conjures up images. But these days, of course, you seldom now see Peter Pan out of green. J.M. Barrie had hoped to see a boy play Peter Pan, but never lived to see the day. A long-standing tradition at the time in theatre was that often women would fill in the roles of young boys. though it's not uncommon nowadays to see men portray Peter Pan on stage. Tradition seemingly stuck with Peter Pan still to this day, and women, of course, can be still seen wearing green, especially in pantomime versions across the British Isles and in musicals. It is also commonplace to see the same actor play Captain Hook and Mr. Darling. Now, while this tradition likely started out with the fact that the early productions of Peter Pan were on a budget and required an actor to double up in 2 roles, it soon became read as an intentional order to show how Mr. Darling is tame when around his wife, Mrs. Darling, as she keeps him grounded. But when she's not around, Mr. Darling begins acting like a pirate, like someone who just likes to fight. Similar, perhaps, to how the Lost Boys misbehave without a motherly figure. Now this you may know, but famously all the rights to Peter Pan were handed over to the UK Great Ormond Street Hospital. Now in 1929, J.M. Barrie donated the copyright of Peter Pan to this children's hospital, currently one of the largest centre for children's heart surgery, and does amazing work. It's located in Bloomsbury in the London Borough of Camden, and the Great Ormond Street Hospital receives royalties for every production of the play that is staged. The exact amount in royalties has never been revealed, even to this day, as the hospital continues to honour the late playwright's non-disclosure agreement. Before the phrase, "Don't try this at home, kids," was invented, there was pixie dust. As a result of many alarming reports of children imitating the play by attempting to fly from their beds and subsequently injuring themselves, J.M. Barrie came up with the concept of pixie dust, aka fairy dust, as a necessity for being able to fly. Hence the playwright's newly rewritten mentions that I mentioned earlier. Interestingly, the infamous line, "To die would be an awfully big adventure," was censored from the play and production staged during World War I. The original producer of Peter Pan, a man called Charles Frohman, quoted the line as his famous last words when he refused a seat on a lifeboat as the RMS Lithuania sank from a German torpedo attack in 1915. In the original version of the play, Captain Hook utters the school motto, "Florit et Tona," which, it is believed by many, that Captain Hook attended Eton College, a famous boarding school for boys aged 13 to 18 in the UK. And then it was also confirmed by both J.M. Barrie and Treasure Island author Robert Louis Stevenson that Captain Hook knew Long John Silver. Some fascinating facts about Peter Pan. Very rarely that it happens nowadays that a play gets turned into a book that inspires many movies for years to come. And talking about Peter Pan and movies, one of my most favourite of all Peter Pan referenced in films is from another Steven Spielberg movie, E.T. Parallels are commonly found in that wonderful movie, but there is a delightful scene when the mum is reading to Gertie, the little sister of Elliot, some Peter Pan, as Elliot and E.T. from far away bonds and listens to that bedtime story. And so, maybe E.T. is listening now, wherever he gets his podcast from. That famous scene from that famous chapter of Peter Pan. It's called Chapter 13. Do you believe in fairies? I hope you're sitting comfortably, or if you're curled up in bed, this is your cue to close your eyes. Peter Pan slept on. The light guttered and went out, leaving the tenement in darkness. But still he slept. It must have been not less than 10 o'clock by the crocodile when he suddenly sat up in bed, wakened by he knew not what. It was a soft, cautious tapping on the door of his tree. Soft and cautious, but in that stillness it was sinister. Peter felt for his dagger till his hand gripped it. Then he spoke. "Who is that?" For long there was no answer. Then again the knock. "Who are you?" No answer. He was thrilled, and he loved being thrilled. In 2 strides he reached its door. Unlike Slidely's door, it filled the room, so he could not see beyond it, nor could the one knocking see him. "I won't open unless you speak," Peter cried. Then at last the visitor spoke, in a lovely, bell-like voice. "Let me in, Peter." It was Tink, and quickly he unbed her. She flew in excitedly, her face flushed and her dress stained with mud. "What is it?" "Oh, you'll never could guess," she cried, and offered him 3 guesses. "Out with it!" he almost shouted. And in one sentence, as long as the ribbons conjurers pull from their mouths, she told of the capture of Wendy and the boys. Peter's heart bobbled up and down as he listened. Wendy bound, and on the pirate ship, she who loved everything to be just so. "I'll rescue her," he cried, leaping at his weapons. As he leapt, he thought of something he could do to please her. He could take his medicine. His hand closed on the fatal drink. "No!" shrieked Tinkerbell, who had heard Hook muttering about his deed as he sped through the forest. "Why not? It's poisoned." "Poisoned? Who could have poisoned it?" "Hook. Don't be silly. How could Hook have got down here?" Alas, Tinkerbell could not explain this, for even she did not know the dark secret of Slightly's tree. Nevertheless, Hook's words had left no room for doubt. The cup was poisoned. "Besides," said Peter, quite believing himself, "I never fell asleep." He raised the cup. No time for words now, time for deeds, and with one of her lightning movements, Tinkerbell got between his lip and the cup and drained it to the dregs. "Why, Tink, how dare you drink my medicine?" But she did not answer. Already she was reeling in the air. "What's the matter with you?" cried Peter, suddenly afraid. "It was poisoned, Peter," she told him softly. "Now I'm going to be dead." "Oh, Tink, you drink it to save me." "Yes. Why, Tink?" Her wings could scarcely carry her now, but in reply she alighted on his shoulder and gave his chin a loving bite. She whispered in his ear, "You silly ass," and then tottering to her chamber, lay down on the bed. His head almost filled the fourth wall of her little room as he knelt down near her in distress. Every moment her light was growing fainter, and he knew that if it went out, she would be no more. She liked his tears so much that she put out her beautiful finger and let them run over it. Her voice was so low that at first he could not make out what she said. Then he made it out. She was saying that she thought she could get well again if children believed in fairies. Peter flung out his arms. There were no children there, and it was night time. But he addressed all who might be dreaming of Neverland, and who, therefore, nearer to him than you think. Boys and girls in their 90s, in their baskets hanging from trees. "Do you believe?" he cried. Tink sat up in bed almost briskly to listen to her fate. She fancied she heard answers in the affirmative, and then again she wasn't sure. "What do you think?" she asked Peter. "If you believe," he shouted, "clap your hands. Don't let Tinkerbell die!" Many clapped. Some didn't. A few little beasts hissed. The clapping stopped suddenly, as if countless mothers had rushed to their nurseries to see what on earth was happening. But already, Tink was saved. First her voice grew strong, and then she popped out of bed. Then she was flashing through the room more merry and impotent than ever. She never thought of thanking those who believed, but she would have liked to get the ones who had hissed. And now, to rescue Wendy. The moon was riding in a cloudy heaven when Peter Pan rose from his tree, with weapons and wearing little else, to set out upon his perilous quest. It was not such a night as he would have chosen. He had hoped to fly, keeping not far from the ground, so that nothing unwanted should escape his eyes. But in that fitful light, to have flown low would have meant trailing his shadow through the trees, thus disturbing the birds and acquainting a watchful foe that he was astir. He regretted now that he had given the birds of the island such strange names, and they are very wild and difficult of approach. There was no other course but to press forward, in which happily he was adept. But in what direction? For he could not be sure that the children had been taken to the ship. A slight, fall of snow had obliterated all footmarks, and a deathly silence pervaded the island, as if, for a space, nature stood still in horror of the recent carnage. He had taught the children something of the forest lore that he himself learned from Tiger Lily and Tinkerbell, and knew that in their dire hour they were not likely to forget it. Slightly, if he had had an opportunity, would blaze the trees, for instance. Curly would drop seeds, and Wendy would leave her handkerchief at some important place. But morning was needed to search for such guidance, and he could not wait. The upper world had called him, but would give no help. The crocodile passed him, but not another living thing. Not a sound, not a movement. And yet he knew well that sudden death might be at the next tree, or stalking him from behind. He swore this terrible oath. Hook or me this time. Now he crawled forward like a snake, and again he darted across a space on which the moonlight played, one finger on his lip and his dagger at the ready. He was frightfully happy. And that, of course, is the famous scene from the chapter Do You Believe in Fairies from J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. Well, I hope listening to this week's podcast and some of Peter Pan has you nearly close to sleep and your own adventures in your dreams. Maybe you will be flying to Neverland. Thank you for listening. This has been Your Story Corner, the podcast. Remember to make sure you follow us if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, or wherever you're getting your podcasts. And if you have enjoyed it, and you be so kind, you can leave us a review or click the stars. It really helps us reach more people. And make sure to visit our website, Yourstorycorner.com, and follow us across all our social media sites, especially TikTok, so you'll know when we go live together. But until then, it's time for you to tuck in now. Close your eyes and allow yourself a good night's sleep. So wherever you are, whoever you are, thank you for finding us. And remember, you are not alone. And no matter whatever is going on in your world, it will pass. It's going to pass. And you are going to be okay. Until next time we're together, good night, sleep tight, and we'll see each other soon. Good night.